Hello and welcome to Transforming Tomorrow, the podcast from the Pentland Centre for Sustainability and Business here at Lancaster University Management School. I'm Paul Turner.
And I'm Professor Jan Babington.
Jan, we're going to be talking to someone who I very recently discovered was a former PhD student of yours, for which I have an immense sympathy, but he appears to have gone on and had a successful career anyway.
It is such a joy to welcome Nick Barter to our podcast today. So Nick and I met at the University of St Andrews and we worked together. I mean, I supervised his PhD. I think he basically did his PhD and dragged me along for fun. And then we worked together in a master's degree in sustainable development. So then he escaped. He left the country. And so is joining us today from Australia again.
Yes, where Nick is a professor at Griffith University Business School in Queensland, where I dare say, even though it's winter down there, it's still a darn sight warmer than it is here in Lancaster today. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Jan. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. Or your podcast, should I say. My apologies. So it's lovely to be here and a real privilege. And yeah, Jan, we did meet a long time ago and at St Andrews. And yeah, I came to Australia in 2011 to pretty much finish the PhD and got on a plane pretty much kind of thing. And it started a life down here, which is, turned into becoming a Australian and all sorts. So yeah, I feel more Australian than I do British currently. And our days are probably 22 to 24.
Now you're just showing off. Now you're just showing off for your winter temperatures.
He definitely sounds Australian. He's been very arrogant about the weather. That's sounds about right, yes.
Well, I guess that sort of introduced you to our listeners, and the focus of this podcast is on a phrase that you've used from your dissertation, PhD dissertation onwards, and that's future normal. And I've always thought that that's an absolutely, fantastic phrase. And I wonder, how did you come across it, and why have you been drawn to it, and how do you use it to inform your work?
Gosh, that's a great question. So, yeah, I was looking the other day actually because it's in my PhD and you forget these things. So that phrase, I remember sitting so when I was studying with Jan at St Andrews, I actually lived in Edinburgh and would commute. St Andrews about an hour and a half away. And so I was in my study in the house I had with my wife and children in Edinburgh and reviewing the interviews I'd done for my PhD. And there were two people that I got that phrase from. And one of them was an interviewee with I can't remember the name of the companies now, but one of them had set up a development housing, kind of co-housing development with some business in it. And the person who was running that was a lady. She was talking about how she'd met with city investors and they were very interested in what they were doing and should they put the money into it. And then she talked about how she created cohesion with all the people there and would get, like if you worked there, you would have a week where, if I'd worked there, for example, she was explaining, you'd have a week where part of my role that week would be to help prepare lunch for everybody. And so she said it's, really what it is she said, I talk to these people from the city, actually, as she was describing at the time, and they don't understand what I'm doing, for example, with these kind of community, kind of organizational lunches, which helps pull together cohesion in the team. And she said, I think I'm just living a little bit in the future. And then the normal was from another company that made clothes. And they were talking about, I spoke to the CEO and the founder of that company, and I said at the end, can I use your quotes and things like that? Because I may want to write articles and stuff. And he said, look, I know you need to write all these articles and about what I'm doing, etc., but it shouldn't be normal to be a polluter. And it shouldn't be this, that, and the other. And he said, I think it should be normal to clean up after yourself and all this kind of stuff. And so I was sitting in the study and I was reviewing these interviews, and for some reason the words future and the word normal from those two kind of conversations just slapped me between the eyes. And Here I am 15, 16, 17 years later, still talking about it. So I've just lived with it for a long time, and I thought it had a nice ring with it. And so, yeah, it's stuck. So that's where it came from. Thank you for asking.
I don't, I've known you for ages. I don't actually think I know that. So that was really interesting to hear.
Did you not pay any attention to what Nick told you when he was a PhD researcher? You did, occasionally. Not all the time, though, obviously. And this obviously is a...
I was very lucky in my PhD journey, both in terms of, I think at the time, as you look back as a PhD student, I don't think I knew what I was doing half the time. But Jan was kind enough to let me wander around aimlessly, try to work out what it was I was doing. And it's, that kind of supervision where you allow people to emerge into the space they're looking to find, even though they're not sure what it is they're looking for until they get to the end of it, was really beneficial, and probably, in retrospect, knowing myself better, probably the only way I could have been supervised. So thank you, Jan.
That's all right. That was my judgment. It was the best way to do it.
I don't think Nick's read the brief, because I'm pretty sure it says you're not allowed to compliment Jan too much on this podcast. And that's certainly the brief I got at the start of the series.
We are where we are.
Obviously, Nick, that Future Normal has stayed with you, and you've just had a book published not too long ago, yourself and Chris Fleming, Future Normal, 8 questions to create businesses your children will be proud of. So can you just tell us a little bit about the book, and then why 8 questions? Why not 9? Why not 7?
Yeah, that's right. So Future Normal and the idea of these questions stayed with me for a long time. And I joined Griffith and did various roles, taught from my PhD, but had this idea of a book in my mind for a long, long time with the Future Normal language. But the notion of a book with 8 questions and almost like a toolkit element I'd actually had from the late 90s when I was a consultant in London with one of the big 4. And somewhere around 2019, Chris Fleming, who's been such a great colleague and unfortunately can't be here because he's traveling in Europe and is probably jet lagged and all over the place at the moment. I threw him this kind of rough idea around the book. For some reason, Chris was traveling to Melbourne from Brisbane, and he looked at this rough idea and came back and he went, I reckon we could sell a lot of these. I was like, okay, should we do it? And he enabled the whole start of the journey. He kind of gave me the push and the confidence. And so, yeah, he's been such a great collaborator. And so through that period, till the book was published, it was about 3 years or so, we were, how many questions was it to be? So we started with 20, and then publishers said, not 20. So we actually knocked it down to 8 through a process where we had pieces of paper all around the walls and everything, and we're trying to work out what it should be. And then, yeah, we got it to 8, not through a process of should it be 8, should it be 10. It was just the process, the number that emerged from the process of removing redundancy in questions, deciding that some questions wouldn't fit what we were trying to do with the book. Because we had in our mind that market of the CEO, the board, the C-suite, the kind of senior manager, the MBA student, the kind of people that think about the strategic direction of an organization and how it frames up. And so, yeah, we just knocked a load out. And then I think when we had 8, I think Chris said, 8's a lucky number in Asia. And we're kind of based in the Asia Pacific. We went, well, that'll do us. We'll go with 8. So that's how we ended up with 8. There's no particular science in terms of like focusing on a number. It was an emergent process. But it's ended up, just to round this a little bit out, those questions are in 2 halves. And the first 4 really are about direction setting, culture, stakeholders, and metrics. And then the second half delve a little bit more a bit deeper into the business. So they go to language, operations, and then finally how you compete as well. So there is sense in those 2 halves, which was probably a little bit of push and a little bit of post-rationalization and all sorts of things.
The good thing is as well, Nick says he started off with 20, they went down to 8. Just because they've done 8 didn't mean they made those 8. The book isn't 5,000 pages and each question is taken up by hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's a good thickness of a book. It's not got too much content in it. It seems to be distilling the messages down into a decent length.
And I suppose that speaks to the audience of the book, which is people who want to pick up something and read it quick, or get something from the airport lounge and have a bit of a look and grasp it.
And have you indeed seen this book in an airport lounge?
No, but Nick has sent me pictures of this book in departure bookshops and departure zones. Yeah, more than once.
Yeah, one of the things Chris and I have learned from promoting a book is we've learned how you have to keep promoting it. And so one of the things that means is that if you now, part of the purpose of the podcast is to talk about the book, but if you met me for coffee, I would weave in somewhere along the lines, I've written a book, blah, blah, blah. So it gets, at one level that's a bit tiresome, but we've realized it's a bit like, we often liken it to if we were a new band starting out, we'd have to do, you'd promote your band all the time, and we have to do that with the book all the time. Yeah, we're on this journey of continual promotion, but it also means that one of the other things we wanted to do with the book, like you say, to go to the thickness and everything, was make it pithy and not too long, and put up and downable and those kind of things as well, and trying to find that balance of appropriate depth in terms of thinking and drawing on academia, because the joy of academia is so many wonderful ideas in our journals, in our thinking and the like. But some of the wider academic colleagues will probably condemn me for this, but I think what we're not great at as academics is distilling that and trying to put that in front of an audience at times. And so, I was trying to find that magic line of trying to make it accessible, make it so that anybody could pretty much pick it up. And at one level, I'm sure somebody out there would say you haven't achieved that, but that's what we worked hard to try and achieve. And others would say you got the balance right, and others would say you got the balance completely wrong. But we tried hard to find that balance and have that kind of conversation with the reader. Yeah.
I think that's the kind of balance we try to achieve, Jan. Whether we succeed or not, I don't know.
Yeah, but I think our listeners are going to be on the edge of their seat and want to hear some of these much
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for now, Jan. We're going to have to...
So, the 8 questions. Do you want to guide us through them, and do take them in pairs or fours, or probably pairs are better than 4 at a time, and tell us about them.
Shall we read through the 8 questions first, and then we can split them off?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll read through the questions for you. So number 1 is, does your business's vision perpetuate a world you want to live in? Is your business aligned with our world? Does your business listen to all its stakeholders? Does your business have the metrics? Now, those are the 4 that tied in with what you were saying, Nick, about direction setting, culture, etc. And then we've got the following 4, which are, does your business use language that enables? Does your business understand its footprint and tread carefully? Does your business learn from nature? And does your business lead to enabling others? And they're the second set of 4 relating to things such as operations, language, etc. So they're the 8, Nick. We'll let you pick any one of those 8 and go for it.
Yeah, sure. So starting with the vision question, one of the things we do with the vision is everybody probably understands what a business vision is. It's about some idea or some pithy statement of where an organization wants to get to. And what we actually do in the chapter is we open it up a bit broader than vision to talk about, could be a mission. Some companies talk about mission rather than vision, and some companies talk about purpose rather than vision or mission, etc. So we open that up a bit to basically say, what is the what's the story of your company? What's it trying to do in the world? And then we ask that thing about, is it a world you want to live in? Because we offer up some examples. And so the examples we offer up in the book are about, if your business is trying to be number 1 at something, well, that's great for your business, but is that great for everybody else? And that's what we're trying to get at. And so we actually, on the back of some recent analysis, showing how companies that think this way produce improved returns. And really what it's about, this whole thing is partly saying, okay, what kind of world do you want to live in? And so this is where I would link back to the start of the journey on sustainability. Sustainability isn't mentioned much in this book purposely, but really what sustainability says is, how do you want to live, and what's the intergenerational bargain on how you want to live, right? So how do you want, and so I think of I map out the book, a generation is 30 years, and hence what do you want around you is the big, big question. And so the depth of that vision statement then goes to what does it mean to be a human, and how do you construct that notion of your humanity? And really what it's trying to do all the time is say, remember, you're not, business theory often deals with a decontextualized world. And what we're trying to say is, remember, you're human, you're a physical being, you breathe air, you live in society. We purposely don't call it environment, we call it surroundings. And what we're trying to do with all of this is say, just how do you want to live? What do you want to live in? And then remind people that, and I think this is true for all of us, I don't think there's a hope, a dream, an ambition, an aspiration, a want, a holiday, a piece of clothing, everything we're doing now that hasn't been facilitated by a business in some way, or an organization more broadly. And I think what the power of this question is saying, businesses are the tools we use to shape our world. And does your business recognize that it's a tool shaping our world? And is it a business creating a world you want to live in? And we embed in that also this other question for senior people in organizations to ask, which is to start asking the next generation, so the 30-year younger generation, what they want. So it's all about getting to this more embedded view of who we are. It's about recognizing how organizations shape our world, and then asking a really bold question around that. Is this business shaping the world you want to see? And we don't go at it hard, but we would purposely say any organization that's putting itself ahead of society is missing the point. Organizations should be about enabling a great society. And yeah, sure, they can be number one at what they do. But if it's just about themselves, that feels miserly. It feels like it lacks ambition to us. And we talk about that. And so we talk about, it's a very, very hopeful and very, very ambitious question, that one. And the organizations that embrace it do really well. I'm giving very long answers. I'm sorry.
What I think you've done there, Nick, is answered the first three questions in one, because I think so much of what you said ties in with perpetuating a world you want to live in, but also a business that's aligned with our world and listening to all the stakeholders. Because, I mean, you talk there about the different generations and the younger people, the older people. So within all of that, you can see how all those three questions do tie in together nicely.
And I suppose...
Thank you.
I think that's really great. But then it's also like, I think some of the next three questions tie in nicely as well. So like, does your business have the metrics? Does it have the language that will enable? And does it understand its footprint? So I wonder if you could, maybe take our listeners through those three elements together.
Hopefully I can. So the metrics should be obvious, I think, in terms of, at one level it's obvious. I'm saying it's more than money. You should be measuring more than money. And obviously there's a whole industry around that. When I was studying with Jan all that time ago, we talked about 5 capitals or 6 capitals or various versions of that. And that's morphed into integrated reporting. And now, ESG is a thing. So there's hundreds of metrics out there, et cetera. And so we talk about, in the book, we talk a little bit about, the SDGs as possible and all their targets as one way of thinking about different metrics. But then you could go to an ESG framework, you could go to an integrated reporting framework. And really what we're trying to say is, can you start to take a more holistic balance, a more holistic view of how you measure success in your organization? And part of that then is really trying to argue this kind of human first perspective. What does it mean to be human? And are you enabling great humans in your organization? And that's part of what's embedded in that chapter, really. Actually, I should say that this whole thing is very human first, but it's a very expanded view of what it means for us to live well.
My question, Nick, is you're talking about all these metrics. I want to know where you stand on benchmarking, which is a favourite of my colleague to my left here, Jan, about benchmarking. Is that something that you cover in the book, with regards to companies ranking themselves against each other or being ranked against each other by other organisations?
Actually, I would like to say yes, it is. And I'd like to have some pithy, kind of witty answer to that. But no, I don't think we do cover benchmarking. So apologies for that. But that's
you don't need to apologise to me. Don't apologise to me for not doing benchmarking. I'm all on your side.
One of the things about benchmarking is that once you get your own house in order, maybe you'd do that. But I think these questions about getting your own house in order and being really clear about what you're doing.
Yes.
So back to you, Nick, as we work our way through the numbers.
Yeah. I think also, yeah, just on benchmarking, one of the things I would say as well is that I think what's important with benchmarking is, yes, to do some. And I seem to be having these conversations a lot about how organizations have to be kind of ambidextrous and they can't just be one thing or the other. They have to be both. And so what I would say is benchmarking matters because it helps you understand what, say, good looks like. But I also think benchmarking is a problem if it creates myopia, in terms of it creates the short-sightedness where you think it's only about the benchmarking, because I think we've got to be able to be double-handed or both short and long-sighted in terms of using benchmarking to bring us up, but also being able to look past benchmarking and say, what does it mean to, be hopelessly ambitious in this area? What would actually change the game in this area? What would actually really move us forward? So I think, like all things, what I'm going at here is making sure that you use benchmarking as a tool to help shift and move, but not necessarily as a tool that then becomes a psychic prison, which you can't then break out of as well. So
it sounds like Nick has the same kind of limitations on benchmarking that I have. That people just have that tunnel vision that all they're doing is caring about the benchmarking and the rankings.
But the other word you used that I was really interested in, because we've heard it before in the podcast, is to be ambidextrous. So Marion White talked about ambidextrous leaders, but also an earlier podcast from Lyndon talked about being able to hold multiple truths and to be able to navigate between them. So I think that ambidexterity, I got the word out, is a really important part of what was required for the future as well.
I feel we've distracted ourselves from the 8 questions.
Sorry.
No. I'm more to blame for this than anyone.
Yeah, I would really underline that because, when we talk about a human-centric, one of the things and the language talks about metaphors, and it says, don't think of your organization as a machine because it's too limiting. Don't think about, and it also talks about then HR as being too limiting because you commodify people in the process, etc. And we're more than commodities. And so really what it's getting at, that whole language piece, and it actually then talks about psychologically distant language versus psychologically close language as well, partly to enable action. So it will say, if you're talking about, for example, gaseous effluents or off gases or something, that's really nice. But that's distant language, which makes you think it's not really a problem or you're not really, it's over there. Whereas if you talk about how does this impact the air I breathe, you suddenly bring it all closer and your spur to action is better. Part of that is challenging and confronting, but what it has in the middle of it is this deeply humane way of thinking, which is to say, really, it's one Earth, it's a complex system, we all run around in the same space pretty much. And because there's so many of us now on the planet, the question we now face is how do we live on this planet? What does it mean to operate on this planet? Whereas before, when I was born, there was 3 billion of us, and so there was lots of out there kind of thing, and that isn't the case anymore. And so I think to get back to that ambidextrous nature is we need people that can not think just linearly. We need people that can hold multiple systemic ideas in their mind and then realize that the answer to that is not a math problem. The answer to that is a feeling problem or a kind of a sociological bringing together, finding the balance with everybody problem, which is not, it's not a math problem. So I think that ambidextrousness is really important, and it requires a different form of leadership.
When we come to the 8 questions, we've really just got the last couple left, which are tying in around, does this business learn from nature? Which ties in a bit there what you're saying about businesses learning generally, but also then the last question, does your business lead to enabling others? I'm emphasising the word lead there because I get the feeling that is that being a leading business as well as enabling, the leading part must be key. But I'll leave that for you, Nick, because they're obviously your questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think you've captured footprinting is, I think we're all fairly comfortable with footprinting, and that chapter talks about various footprints. Learning from nature is about biomimicry, circular economy, those kind of things. And enabling others is probably the one that takes a bit more of a left turn. we're often taught in business, I think, that we're supposed to compete with each other and we're supposed to beat each other and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's nice, but I think it's ultimately zero-sum game. And I think what we're trying to say here is, what are we really trying to achieve? And if we're really trying to achieve great places to live and great societies and great economies, then do we really need to compete with each other, or do we need to enable each other to do great work? So, sharing ideas, sharing practices, sharing procedures, etc., I think is how we enable others. And we do this kind of anyway through industry forums and various other bits and pieces. But then somehow or other, we're still supposed to think we're supposed to be in some dogfight with each other. And that chapter kind of tries to dispel a lot of that. It dispels a lot of the basic underlying economic theory behind that. So Chris wrote a fair bit of that. And then it also talks about what kind of business do you want to be? Because part of what it's trying to get at is that most businesses aren't monopolies. And yes, some really big businesses end up monopolizing things, but most businesses aren't. And most businesses help each other and offer each other advice. And it's really getting to that piece, which is to kind of wrap back to the front of the book and say, if you want to create a world we want to live in, this isn't about competing in some zero-sum game with each other. It's about enabling others. And so, yeah, this is probably the point where I should admit, what some of the underlying premises of the book: hope, ambition. It's super hopeful, this book. I mean, it's like, in that regard, it's not for the hard business person who likes to take it all, as if it's some hard game. This is playful at some level, but responsible. Playful in terms of that ambition piece, which is, I just think we can be so ambitious with our organizations, but we've got to give ourselves permission to do that. And part of that permission is hopefully where teachers like Jan come in, and what you're doing in your centre, what we've been doing at Griffith, what this book is trying to say: look up, it's amazing, all this stuff. We can do super amazing things with our organization. Let's reach for more and ask them to do more than be so reductive that all they focus on is a number. Because when we ask them to do more, what happens is people want to join, customers want to buy. And what I mean by that is, in practical sense, customers become loyal, employees become more loyal, employees bring more of their selves to work. So they want to, the idea is, when the organization's for a big idea, they will bring more of themselves, more of their energies, more of their hopes, more of their dreams to their organization. Those organizations innovate more. Those organizations, like I say, have better customer loyalty. And all of those things, in the most wonderful way, because I'm not naive, translate straight through to bottom and top lines. Customer loyalty translates through to improved top line and improved bottom line, as does employer loyalty. And so part of this whole book is saying the ways of thinking about business need to shift, and we need to ask them to pick up the responsibilities they do have. And by the way, when you do that, you can be more ambitious and you can do more interesting things than you ever thought possible. And yes, if it's all about the numbers at the end of the day, you will make shed ton of money, and you'll probably make more money than you ever realize, because you'll be playing for a bigger game.
I think that ambition is glorious, and I really like it. Have you got a sense of how the businesses that are reading your book hear that message, and are they in touch, feeling inspired? I mean, what kind of business response have you had?
So one of the things going forward is to try and do this with more and more businesses. So we've worked with, I can't think now, half a dozen businesses, working on these ideas. And I think it's fair to say it's very well accepted. I think it's fair to say that probably one of the ideas we talk about in the book is 2D strategy versus 3D strategy. And I think the businesses we work with probably hear some of our ambition and go, well, can we go to 2.5D? And we're like, yeah, we'll let you.
Yeah.
So, and we're like, we'll go there with you. So I think like anything, it's not on or off, it's a transition. But I do think clearly this message is not for everybody, but it is for some people, and those people that pick up the book and read it will hopefully find a lot in it for them. You know, every business is chasing some version of how to deal with the next generation, particularly that generation who want more purposeful businesses, want a different working arrangement, both in their employment, want complex problems, etc., etc. This book plays into that. So, and that generation, which I always forget, that Generation Z is going to be some high proportion of the workforce very soon, if it's not already. And they want a different bargain, and this book speaks to that different bargain. They want companies to think about the world they're creating, the society they're creating, the footprint they have, etc., etc., the way they talk to each other, the kind of dealing with the world as it is, not as some kind of misplaced cultural assumptions about how the world is. They want businesses to lower their footprint. They don't want businesses to be involved in some cutthroat game. And so I think at some level this whole book speaks to a generational change as well.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. I think that's a great place for us to come to an end, and we will, of course, include a link to the book in the episode description for any of our listeners who are interested in checking out that book, Future Normal, 8 Questions to Create Businesses Your Children Will Be Proud Of. Thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you very much. It's been a real privilege and honour to be asked, so thank you.
So, Jan, we've got one episode left on this first series of Transforming the World. We're almost there. Only before now and then, you've got to get grilled. It's your turn to answer some questions. We have a few questions that listeners have sent in. We're going to be going through them in our last episode of this series, and that'll be fun for you, won't it?
I'm so looking forward to it.
I can tell from the look on your face. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. I'm Paul Turner.
And I'm Professor Jan Bebbington.